Hey everyone, Will Bossard here, and I'm glad you guys took the time to watch my video. I am going to be a social science teacher, and one of the more difficult chapters of teaching social science is teaching freshmen, and not just teaching freshmen, but teaching world religions. At least it is for my district, and I would imagine it's the same more or less throughout the state. I really want to get as good as I can at teaching this particular class, and I've taught this class in the past, but it is probably the most controversial in terms of the content that we teach. We have to be very careful in what we present, and that being said, the only things that we can present are normally state approved. And as a teacher, we're taught over and over that the only things we can really teach are the methods and the sort of content of each religion. And we are supposed to steer away from the practice of each religion. A good example of that would be we're only supposed to teach the concept of prayer as opposed to actually praying in class. These would raise some very obvious sort of problems, and you can see why someone might be upset to the point that they feel uncomfortable and they need to bring it, to administration and things like that. So we're given some training, but it really, like anything else, it really takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of just in class time and learning how to take care of your responsibilities as a teacher. So this is my unit plan, and I went through and I described the entire unit. I was able to fit the entire unit into 6 weeks. It's about an 8-week class normally. We are told that if we can, we want to go a little bit faster, especially for the second semester, because it's broken down into semesters. As a freshman, you'll get health or world religions geography, and you take one in one semester and take one in the other semester. And we like to get this to go a little faster because if we can get to the end, we can take time to go back, or we can help those students who maybe didn't get something. And if there happen to be seniors in the class who say didn't pass it the first time, they can go on senior trips, and they can go on or take care of all the responsibilities that are involved with being a senior. So the daily lesson that I went to, let me scroll down here. So the daily lesson that I took was from the very beginning, and I think it's extremely important to talk about this one, especially for this assignment, because it really does set up the rest of the class. And I apologize about my voice; I'm a little bit under the weather right now, so please bear with me. But in order to understand why we teach world religions, or what the importance of learning world religions as a student, we have to sort of go back to the very beginning of our country and learn about the Constitution and the idea of freedom of religion. So, excuse me, one of the very first lessons that you get as a student in my class is we go over what it means to have freedom of religion, the differences that you might see in the public. And so the very first thing that we do is students come into class. They have a worksheet that's sitting there for them. I introduce the topic. I say, today we're going to be looking at the concept of freedom of religion as it relates to the Constitution. And we go ahead and watch a video. And I pose 2 questions to them, and I will generally write them on the board. And the first one is, what does the Bill of Rights represent? And we all know what the Bill of Rights is and why it was necessary to implement as a country. And the second one is, what does religious freedom mean in the context of the First Amendment? And after we watch the state-approved DVD, and the DVD itself is about famous Supreme Court decisions regarding religious freedom, and it goes over some examples, sort of things like a young lady there was a prayer that was written up on her school gymnasium in the state of Alabama, and she took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they had to take that down because it was the practice of religion inside of his school. One of the best parts about this is that after the DVD is over, we talk about these sort of examples, And I really want the kids to understand the difference between practicing religion on campus and being forced to participate in something that they're uncomfortable with. So it's important because it can be confusing, and a lot of times you see things like prayer groups on campus, and it's a lot of students will either be really confused about the idea of a prayer group on campus as they see it as unconstitutional. Now, the difference between a prayer group and a class-led prayer by a teacher is that you're not being forced to join the club. If you want to participate in the prayer group, the school I teach at has one. They meet at the flagpole every morning, and they have their organization and their procedures and how they do things, but it's completely voluntary. Now, if I told my students in class that it is mandatory that you are out there in the morning and that you are participating in these prayers, that would be a violation of the First Amendment. They wouldn't they wouldn't have to do that, and they could, not only could I get in a lot of trouble, but the school could get into a lot of trouble for very obvious reasons. It's very important to talk about these sorts of things. Most of my students take a very lighthearted approach to the class, and they see it as more of a requirement as opposed to something they get really interested in at the very beginning. And once I give this lesson, they're generally a little more excited about it. And I do this before I even talk about the religions that we're going to study. And the way I set the class up is that I start with the earliest religions first. Now, I obviously don't cover all of them because there's thousands of them. So what do? I pick the 6 largest in the world at this time. And at this time, they are Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, there's some conjecture as to when a couple of these got really popular, and so I use my judgment to kind of, and I bring in some sort of facts and figures, and I don't necessarily have to make the argument that I'm for when I cover them. The only one that we are encouraged to cover last is Islam. And that is because it's such a controversial subject now, and there's so much misinformation going around regarding the religion that it can be a very difficult situation if you get into situations where you have students who want to present to you sort of a controversial opinion, and they might have heard things and they're very emotionally involved in it. And it can be very difficult when you have students in your class who are Muslim, and you have to be very careful about how you present it and really how much discussion you allow, because at some point you have to take the reins as a teacher and understand and make your students understand that they have to be very careful about what they talk about and what can be allowed. As far as the differences between what I can and can't teach, I absolutely cannot talk about my own faith or my own religious values or lack of religious values or whatever it happens to be. And it's not just me, it's all teachers. As much as I would love to get into a discussion with my students about my values and where I came from and my upbringing and that sort of thing, it's absolutely not okay, because it can be seen as a mandatory act of participation, and we can get in a lot of trouble for that. So, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you enjoyed my short lesson and how I go through my class. If anything, I hope you learned a little bit about how we social science teachers go about our procedures and how we sort of structure our classes. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you on Tuesday.